Good morning. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicki Hoskin, and I sit on the board of directors for Acromegaly Canada as the director of fundraising. I'm going to apologize now because I am nervous. This is not my thing. I'm incredibly shy, and my body's probably going to take this to another level at some point, so I apologize. Despite all that, I'm happy to share my story. My husband, Grant, will be presenting next. Grant and I have been together over 25 years. We live in the small town of Hampton. We have 2 daughters. And a dog named Lula. Sorry. Before I dive into my story, I wanted to start with a quick question. How well do you know your own body? We notice the small stuff, changes, small freckles, new bruise, a few extra pounds. Sometimes the biggest changes happen so slowly that we don't notice them at all. That is my big change. Over the next 30 minutes, I'll walk you through my very long journey to a diagnosis and what that looked like for me. Being sick just isn't about your health, it affects your whole life. Relationships, routines, behaviors. It's confusing being told you're fine when you know there's something wrong. It's the relief of finally getting a diagnosis, even when the diagnosis is scary, and it's the way your world changes when you realize your body is no longer playing by the same rules as everyone else. Let's start at the beginning of how I got from something's wrong to finally having a diagnosis, because even though we share the same condition, every journey is a little different. It's hard to pinpoint exactly where my story begins. In high school, I was diagnosed with iron deficient anemia. Later in college, my doctors found low B12, and I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia and started receiving B12 shots regularly. During my final semester of college, I began to experience periods of overwhelming fatigue. I remember struggling to get out in bed in the morning, early morning classes, and even the simplest tasks felt draining. I'd come home from school and sleep for hours. My doctor wasn't concerned. I was a teenager in college. I was active. I stayed up late, partied harder than I should have, had heavy periods, was anemic. This was all par for the course. In my late teens and early 20s, I began experiencing vasovagal syncope, the sudden fainting spell where your body decides to shut down without warning. One of the first and most memorable episodes happened while visiting a couple we just started getting to know. We were sitting in their living room one evening watching a movie. I suddenly blacked out and came to in their brand new Lazy Boy recliner, completely mortified, not only because I had fainted, but had also lost control of my bladder. Nothing says let's be friends quite like fainting and wetting yourself in someone's brand new chair, right? Perfect first impressions. I was referred to a doctor of internal medicine and a neurologist. They put me through a series of tests. I did my first of many tilt table tests to see how my body handled change in position, an EEG to check brain activity. The results were a mixed bag. I was diagnosed with orthostatic hypotension. My sodium levels and blood pressure were both low. Didn't know the cause. The EEG came back normal. My results were off, pointed to nothing definitive, and wasn't really considered serious. Next was my hands. There was constant swelling. They were sore, achy. Some days it hurt just to hold a pencil, grip a coffee, and at times my fingers would stiffen so much it felt like I was about to drop whatever I was holding. Writing assignments, taking notes in class, even carrying something as simple as a mug became unexpectedly difficult, and it just hurt. I was sent for x-rays. I had bony growths in between my fingers here. Again, no real cause, no real concern, nothing serious. Right after college, I began to work at the school board. My first placement was at a school with an early start and a long commute. It quickly became clear just how much of a toll that combination would take on me. I remember recess breaks where instead of catching up with coworkers, I would fall asleep so deeply that I had to be woken up. One of my coworkers, knowing how much I was struggling at the time, had offered to let me take lunch hours at her house. I would collapse onto her couch and sleep through the lunch break and somehow scrape through enough energy to make it through the rest of the day. This was how I managed to get through my first school year. Over time, it became too much. Between the commute, the relentless fatigue, and the weight of my symptoms, I'd made the decision to transfer schools, hoping that a shorter commute, a fresh start, might make things a little more manageable. I did the unthinkable and put my name on the transfer list. If you work in education, you know that's not something you do. I started a new school in September. Around the same time, I started expecting what seemed like morning sickness. Day after day, the nausea would hit me, sometimes with no warning at all. My doctor was quick to rule out pregnancy, ordered some more tests. I was referred to another specialist. It was decided I had reciprocal vomiting and was most likely caused by everyday stress. In other words, the explanation was my body was fine, it was my mind that needed to calm down, and once again, it didn't really explain anything. So I would drive to work with my little puke bucket, spare clothes just in case, and for the next 3 to 4 years, this became my new normal. Hopefully I'd be sick before I had to leave the house for work. Hopefully I'd have enough energy to make it through the day. As I am writing this, still to this day, I'm trying to wrap my head around how normal I made this. Everybody leaves the house with their bucket to be sick in on the way to work, right? Somewhere along the way, things shifted. I'm not sure if I was giving up, giving in, if I just stopped looking for answers. I stopped clinging to the theory that something was wrong. Answer or no answer, it was time to adjust. I had to learn to cope. Whether my symptoms eased or I simply got better at pushing through, I can't say for sure. It was probably a bit of both. Either way, I carried on. I loved my new school. Life is good. We bought our first house, got married, had started university, even went back to working part-time at a group home, a job that I loved. I was still what I like to call fake sick and feeling unwell, but with no real explanation. I had no choice but to manage. Told myself nothing was wrong. It was all in my head, and I just needed to keep going. I made it through university relatively unscathed. I was tired at the end of the day. Early morning and night classes were still a struggle, but by now I was used to that. What I wasn't used to was the brain fog that crept in. In my third year, I started to have trouble. All of a sudden, I couldn't keep up. I was getting confused, trying to listen to my professor and take notes at the same time. Following along became impossible. My notes didn't make sense, and for the first time ever, I failed the class. I failed cognitive psychology. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent 6 months learning about cognitive function, memory, attention, problem solving, while unknowingly struggling with my own cognitive decline. Around September 2009, I found out I was pregnant, and it was the first time in a long time that my body felt at ease. I had energy to spare. The constant ache in my bones had disappeared. There was color back in my face, and I felt genuinely well in a way I hadn't for as long as I can remember. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. The constant aches and pains, fatigue, and nagging symptoms that had been my normal simply faded into the background. That year stands out as one of the best stretches of health I've had. I could keep up, I enjoyed life, and I finally got a taste of what it felt like not to be weighed down by the mysterious, unexplained problems at the time. I couldn't question it, I was just grateful. Enter baby Bella. She was perfect, 6 pounds, 7 ounces, and slept through the night from the very beginning. She ate well and met all her milestones early. My health remained stable, and we had an incredible first year. Not long after that, my health problems slowly started to return. I started having more body pain, aches, pains in my legs, hands, and now my chest. I was puffy and started having gastrointestinal issues. My body was unraveling piece by piece. New symptoms seemed to come and go almost daily. Things felt like they were piling on top of each other, and it was becoming impossible to keep track. The pain became constant, my bones hurt deep inside, my feet felt like they were breaking from the inside. Somewhere along the way, I had to have my wedding rings cut off twice, and my feet had grown 3 sizes. If you've ever watched Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, you might remember Harry explaining that regrowing bones is one of the most painful things that he'd ever gone through. The professor tells him, nasty business growing bones, and I agree. The vomiting returned with vengeance, unpredictable, exhausting, and now with the baby, anxiety-inducing. You can't be in the bathroom throwing up when your baby is crying. I wasn't just struggling to get through the day, I was fighting to stay upright, fighting to function, trying to keep my eyes open. Everything felt heavy, my body, my thoughts, the air around me. I often described feeling toxic. This is when things once again shifted and went from difficult and frustrating to overwhelming and unmanageable. I started missing work to go to sleep. I dropped my little girl off at Montessori and go back home to bed. Little by little, I began withdrawing. I pushed away friends because I simply didn't have the energy to keep up, and even the thought of making plans felt overwhelming. My house was a mess. I struggled with my responsibilities at home and at work. I was diagnosed with GRED, put on a gluten-free diet, with the thought being I was gluten intolerant or even possibly celiac. I was constantly anxious, I was depressed, and I felt disconnected. And underneath all that, I was angry. I was so angry. Angry at my body, angry at the lack of answers, angry that life was moving on around me while I was trying to survive. I was losing parts of myself piece by piece. I knew it, and I didn't know if I was going to get them back. I was losing both the interest and the ability to do the things I loved. I was becoming a vegetable. I was doing the bare minimum, and I was barely getting by. Next up, my thyroid levels went off the charts. I had low TSH, my T3 and T4 bounced around. I developed a goiter. I was referred to an endocrinologist, and she stated I wasn't a straightforward case and decided I was probably brewing Graves' disease. I think this is where I started to fall apart emotionally and became slightly unhinged. Under a new diagnosis. Crazy. I couldn't get out of bed. I was tired all the time and I was in pain. I was put on antidepressants and sent to the Whitby Psych for evaluation. I was diagnosed with panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. I never felt so defeated in all my life. This wasn't the problem. I wasn't crazy. I've never had anxiety in my life. I completely fell apart up until now. I haven't said much about my husband, but we've been together since high school. He's my best friend. I love this man more than life itself. How do I make him believe I'm not crazy? I didn't need antidepressants. I needed a doctor who'd listen and connect the dots. Call me crazy all you want, but a shrink wasn't going to do it. And it finally was like I had showed up to fight. I'm not someone who gives up easily. I am relentless, stubborn, determined, and strong. I'm used to being a leader, I am used to being in charge, and I was over it. I started seeing a psychologist and enrolled in a group therapy program through the hospital where I went to therapy 3 days a week for 2 hours a day. This wasn't the problem, and I would prove it. I often stated my reality. I have a husband who I love with everything in me. I am loved, safe, protected. We are happy. I live in a beautiful house, a town I love. I love being a mom, have an incredible daughter I want for nothing. What do I have to be depressed about? I really need somebody to explain that to me. This isn't the answer to my symptoms. This is a symptom. Nobody listened, and I fell on deaf ears. It was summer, and the school board had sent me a letter saying I needed to return to work in September. Didn't know how I was going to do it. The thought alone was more than I could handle. I was upset, moody, I was in pain, and I was tired. I couldn't take it anymore, and I broke down. I was begging Grant, you need to help me. We need to do something. I needed him to recognize that this wasn't me, this wasn't a depression problem, something was very wrong, and we needed to figure it out. He picked me up off the floor, promised we would do exactly that, and I didn't go back to work. I'm not sure if it was the end of September or the beginning of October, but just one day I was out with a girlfriend cruising the aisles of the dollar store and just so happened to look up and literally just my eyes fell on a pregnancy test. And I knew. My eyes fell on the pregnancy test. Out of nowhere, I immediately recognized the weightlessness within myself, that the feeling of being well that I wasn't used to. I didn't need to take the test. Somehow I knew. Surprise, out of nowhere, I was pregnant. Once again, pregnancy seemed to flip a switch in my body, and just like that, I felt incredible. Another year of good health, lots of energy, color back in my face. It was like my body loved being pregnant. Labor came and went without any trouble, no complications, and Claire arrived happy, healthy, and strong. This time, however, the feeling didn't last. Claire was barely 6 months old when my symptoms came rushing back. The pain in my feet was so bad I could barely walk or put any pressure on them. My ribs felt like they were melding together. My blood work was messy, but still didn't seem to fit any pattern. I was in my doctor's office on a weekly basis, and she had started to discuss my case with other colleagues. One day, I was just walking out the door, she shouted to me to come back. I'm going to send you for an MRI. It's just a thought, she said. I got a call the next day. She's going to send me to Coburg. It'd be quicker. On June 18th, 2018, I had my first MRI, and on June 19th, I got the results. Nobody tells you the day your life changes forever starts just like any other day. I'm not sure 100% how the day's events transpired. I believe I may have ended up at my doctor's office on my own accord that day. One thing I do know is I was by myself. My doctor came into the room and very calmly and nonchalantly said the results of my MRI were in and that they'd found a macroadenoma. She was talking with a colleague and wanted to send me for some blood work that she hadn't checked yet. She wanted to check something else. She wrote the words macroadenoma down on a piece of paper. I walked out of her office. She made it sound like a cold. I was barely to the waiting room before I dropped down in a chair, pulled out my phone, and Googled the words macroadenoma. I had a brain tumor. I don't remember leaving the doctor's office. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember. June 22nd, my blood work came back and my growth hormone level was 42.7. I now had enough information to fill in the blanks and put the pieces together myself. I have acromegaly, I half asked and half stated. I don't know, she said, but I think it's possible, yes. What does that mean? Again, she said, I don't know. She told me I needed to see my endocrinologist. She would send all the information over and she would help us with next steps. excellent. I'd just wait for the appointment. I waited, and I waited some more. This was serious. How long could it possibly take? 2 weeks went by, and I still hadn't heard anything. I called my doctor's office to see what the holdup was. I was told the situation required a new referral, and I would have to wait to hear back from my own specialist. That's right, my own endo. The one I'd seen the week prior, the one who was supposed to be trying to figure out what was wrong with me this whole time. I couldn't imagine needing to be re-referred to my own specialist, who I was actively working with. This was insane. Again, I was done waiting. It had taken 10 plus years to get this far, 10 years of symptoms, questions, and half-ass answers that never fit together. I wanted real answers, and I wanted them from someone who actually knew what they were talking about. Where I'm from, that means you go to St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. Don't wait, just go to Toronto, family friend said one day. So on a Friday afternoon, when the pressure in my head was incredibly unbearable, my mom and I got in the car. We drove over an hour downtown to Toronto. I walked into the emergency room at St. Mike's Hospital, and I told the triage nurse, I'm in excruciating pain. I have a brain tumor. I also have a GH level of 42. I don't know what this means. That was all it took. They didn't dismiss me. They didn't shrug me off. They did everything. Within hours, I had blood work, a full neurological assessment, and an MRI. In just 3 hours, they'd given me what I've been looking for over a decade, a diagnosis. On Monday morning, I was shaking hands with my new neurosurgeon, the person who had changed my life. On November 28th, Dr. Michael Cusimano removed my tumor, measuring 2.9 by 2.8 by 2.7 centimeters in size. After surgery, my IGF-1 dropped before slowly starting to rise again. I was put on octreotide injections taken subcutaneously 3 times a day and quickly showed signs of improvement. I also developed secondary adrenal insufficiency and required steroid replacement. It took over 10 years for me to be diagnosed. I don't remember all the doctors I've seen or how many tests I went through. I've seen a rheumatologist who told me I was too young and couldn't hurt in that many places. I've seen a cardiologist, 3 different doctors of internal medicine, a dermatologist, a gynecologist, a gastroenterologist, an endocrinologist, a neurologist, and an ENT, a psychologist, psychiatrist, and a social worker. As for symptoms, I experienced severe night sweats, hot flashes, had bone growth in my hands, feet, chest, and jaw. My facial features changed and my skin looked like leather. I experienced rashes, tearing of my tear line. My voice changed, my hair fell out, you name it, I've had it. Looking back, I have trouble with the sequence of events, and a lot of the time it's difficult for me to remember. It seems to blur together. Today, I am okay. I'm still, after all this time, learning my new normal. I lost a lot. I'm still making gains, and I'm still experiencing symptoms. In March, things kind of went sideways for the first time in a while. Some of my numbers are changing, and I'm just kind of waiting to see what comes next. For right now, even on my worst days, I'm 1,000% better than the best day before surgery, and for that, I am grateful. I didn't really do my slides. So, this one didn't come through. So this is tests done in hospital. I had 19 MRIs and 27 ultrasounds, 3 x-rays, 5 CT scans, 3 EEGs, 5 insulin tolerance tests, 7 oral glucose tolerance tests. They were in the end. I was realizing the other day that this is actually only in hospital. So my doctor's office actually had the facility to do most of these tests. I don't have access to them. So the majority of my tests were done in her office. So that number is probably actually almost triple, with the exception of the MRI. Here is some of the things that I went through. I have a barreled chest. The tear layers in my eyes rip a lot from dry eyes. I went through ridiculous rashes on my face, my body. That is one of my favorite rings that I had to have cut off. Those are the shoes that I wore to my wedding. This is the report about my tumor. This is my day that I met Dr. Cusimano. And these are my acromegaly friends who have helped me incredibly. So, thank you for that.
be. I know you do. And this is why it's so important to tell your stories. This is where the healing starts. When you can finally vocalize the journey you've been on and be able to just tell the world and then start healing. And I am so proud of you. You did an amazing job. I know you were nervous when I asked you to do it, but you did an amazing job, and you did good.
Thank you.
And now...
She's helping others now, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Because everybody will hopefully start telling their stories, too. Yeah. So, does anybody have a question at all? Vivian?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was very emotional for everybody in this room. My story wasn't like yours at all. Mine was very straightforward, and I'm thankful for that. One thing I wonder is when I see the change of your feet and your hands, how long before they were, like how far? It was
So
like years.
this picture here, that is my first daughter. She is 4 in that picture.
Right.
She would have been 8, I believe, when I was diagnosed. So yeah, I think the majority of my symptoms probably really got bad after I gave birth to her in 2010.
So you would go to a doctor, talk about your feet, and nobody thought of this? It's shocking if that's...
So this is where I know every year we get into the whole big hands, big feet conversation.
Yeah.
And I know for some people, you feel like that's all you hear. If somebody had told me big hands and big feet, I probably wouldn't have been 10 years. I knew my feet had grown. I knew my hands had grown. Apparently, it's common for your feet to grow after pregnancy. So I had tiny feet. Before I was a tiny person. Before I was pregnant, I wore size 4 shoes from Payless with, like, I had to find the ones that didn't have the balloons and the sparkly laces. So to me, I was like, of course my feet grow. I just had a baby. I thought that was normal, and my feet were exceptionally small. It made sense. Like, oh, I have my big girl feet now. I've had a baby.
But that wasn't something you brought up to a doctor then?
No.
Okay, so that's, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, my feet also grew. I just thought I had large feet, I felt, and now they're larger. But I always thought it was just...
So I do remember at a point where I had told my doctor about my chest. I don't think so much up here. I think here, because when I laid down, my ribs would stick out, and it used to look like I had 4 boobs. Like when I lay down on the bed, I almost looked alien-like because the bottom of my chest stuck out so much. My ribs.
Because something happened, and it never occurred to me till this second. I remember I was probably 21 years old and laying on a beach with a bikini, and somebody came over and said, "Oh, you have 4 boobs." And I'm like, "What?" But yeah, so that I was 21, and they didn't diagnose me. I didn't have any symptoms up until like 40, so maybe even then I was
like trying on a bathing suit, and I don't know, I think I must have had a doctor's appointment like right the next day, and I just casually mentioned it. I'm like, why? My ribs do this. I'm like, it seems like I have 4 boobs. And I remember now looking back, she felt around and she's like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. And I laughed because that was all she said. We never took it any further. Heard about that and what that was. I don't know. Maybe, again, if I had pushed that a little further, I wouldn't be here, but who knows?
Nicki, thanks. It was great presentation.
Thank you.
Do you remember the first time you heard the word acromegaly and what you felt? Or had you heard for it before? You were told you had it.
I was a pretty big researcher. I don't want to say that it didn't come up, but I think there were other things probably, in my opinion, that fit the bill more. And I don't think it was something that I probably didn't look into, again, deep enough to make the connection. As soon as I Googled my symptoms and my GH numbers, right, and then it came out hands, who said yesterday, it's like reading a textbook. And I knew it. I didn't need a doctor to tell me at that point. I was mad my own doctor didn't tell me. Doctor or not, it's not rocket science. What more do you need?
So tough act to follow. So after talks on beagles, dung, and grandma's muffins yesterday, I'm not sure what's left, except for the part that Nicki and Deanna asked me to speak, forced me, not sure. To share my story. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Grant. I'm here to share a small part of my story, what it's like living with Nicki, who has acromegaly. And of course, our daughters Bella and Claire, who, whether they wanted to or not, they are part of this ride as well. Now, if anyone was like me before, you hear acromegaly and you think that that was some sort of dinosaur from Jurassic Park. But no, it's a rare condition caused by a pituitary tumor that makes way too much growth hormone. Not exactly the lottery you would like to win. That's all the medical detail I'm going into. If you want hormone levels and MRI results explained, there are way more qualified people in this room to do that for you. What I can give you is the view from the sidelines. The guy carrying the bags, sitting in the waiting room with cold coffee and trying to make her laugh when she hurts. Because this isn't about a disease, it's about a marriage. It's about a family. It's about the good, the bad, the funny, and the hard stuff you don't see coming. Just so we're clear, I do not have acromegaly, despite my puffy face, sore body, and snack addiction. That's all on me. Nicki's the one that carries the real load. Like some of you may or may not know, when one person in the house has it, everybody in the house has it. There's no opting out. Before, acromegaly life was just life. We were young, working, busy, and having all kinds of fun. Nicki and I were into everything. Professional paintball, it's a thing. Dirt biking, hunting, fishing, friends, parties. We lived fast and didn't think much about the future. Looking back, the signs were all there. The fatigue, the headaches, the aches, the pains, the rings that didn't fit. But at the time, it was easy to blame anything. Stress, anxiety, or just getting older. And I'll admit, I didn't notice half of it. When you see someone every day, you miss the slow changes. And if I'm honest, I didn't take it very serious. I'd say, you're just tired, get some sleep. Not exactly a Nobel Prize winning diagnosis on my part. That's the thing about acromegaly. It sneaks up on you until you can't ignore it anymore. The day came and the diagnosis was there. When the doctor said pituitary tumor and brain surgery, everything changed. It wasn't just her problem anymore. It was our battle. Sorry. I'm a fix-it type guy. You need a wiring harness for an old Ford truck? I'll build it. Need a trailer welded up? I can do that. Most problems I can fix. This I couldn't fix. That kills me. I'm sure the surgeon was a hell of a guy back then. Probably grills a perfect steak, great golf game. But I thought, this guy's not good enough to work on my wife's head. This guy's not good enough. This isn't just anyone. This was my wife. It's my best friend, my partner. And handing her over was the toughest thing I ever did. Here's the thing that nobody tells you. After surgery, life doesn't go back. It doesn't come back to normal. You just get a new normal. It's like working on an old truck. It still runs, but it's got quirks. Headlights don't work unless you kick the fender properly. The carb needs tinkering. There's always a mystery rattle. Acromegaly. That's acromegaly. Still move forward. It still works, but there's noises under the hood. Some days, Nicki's unstoppable. Other days, getting out of bed is the victory. We never know which day it is until we're there. That means canceled plans, picking up the slack, learning when to step in and when to back off, and sometimes learning the hard way that my help isn't always helpful. The hardest moments are when her sharp mind blanks. She'll fill in the gap with her bizat words, and we'll laugh about it, but I know it stings because I know how quick she is and how much it frustrates her and how I can't fix it. All I can do is laugh with her. Now I need to apologize. I did compare my wife to a truck. It's not just wrong. It's very dangerous on my part. She's not a beat up old pickup truck. She's a classic, rare, priceless, timeless, and way out of my price range. So if you see me limping later, don't blame Acromegaly. I'll blame the truck comment. So the hard part that nobody wants to tell you about is the emotional toll. Some days I felt like a rock. Other days I felt like I'm barely holding it together. I've been angry, not angry at her, but at the situation. Why her? Why us? Why can't we just fight over who took the chicken out of the freezer? There's fear. There's MRI test results. It's like waiting for somebody to tell you that your car's ready, but instead they're telling you that your wife needs surgery, brain surgery. And the worst part is the helplessness, watching her in pain and knowing that I can't fix it. I'm a builder, I'm a tinkerer, I'm a fixer. But in those moments, all I can do is hold her hand and remind her she's not alone. And as hard as it is, that's when I see what real strength looks like. So what have I learned? Not enough, obviously. Patience is the patience, not like in traffic, not that type of patience. It's the kind you need when you're working on something and you can't fix it. You just keep on working. You just keep going. You have to keep going. Humor, everybody might not see it this way, but humor is very important. She's named her tumor Timmy, and he's kind of an unwanted house guest. Laughing has got us through a lot of things when nothing else could. We celebrate the small things. A good doctor's appointment, a low pain day, a walk together. Those are all gold. Those things matter. I've also learned that I can't fix everything. That one's tough for me. I can weld, wire, and rebuild things. I can't fix this. My job isn't to fix it, though. It's to stand with Nicki. That's my job. So hope. What do we hope for? I'm learning that we're not alone, and that's a big one. At first, I didn't think anybody could understand, but we've found people who do, family and friends, this community, people who don't need us to explain to them. That's hope. They just get it. That's big. I've got hope because medical science is wild. When someone can take a tumor out of your head and then she's bossing me around a week later in the kitchen, that's incredible. That's incredible. Most of all, I have hope because Nicki, she's tough as nails. She's been through things that would break everybody. She's still standing. She's still joking. She's still pushing forward. And if she can keep going, so can I. So what's the takeaway? Acromegaly isn't just a medical condition, it's a family condition. If I could tell my past self one thing, it would be this. You can't fix it. You can't weld it or duct tape it. All you can do is show up. Now, since I give the surgeon a hard time earlier, I'll say this. I thought you're not good enough to cut into my wife's head, but the truth is, he was. He did his job. And my story is not to take away from him or anybody else's story. It's just my story. So in the end, trusting someone with a scalpel was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than rewiring an old truck. Harder than welding up a trailer. This I couldn't fix. But what I can do is trust my wife, her grit, her humor, her strength. Acromegaly may be part of our story, but it doesn't get to write the ending. That's ours. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grant. That was wonderful. And I like the way you put it with your truck because it all makes sense, right? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.